To Hello Culture Matters podcast. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest. But before I do that, here is a quote I picked just for this episode. The single most powerful asset we all have is our mind. If it is trained well, it can create enormous wealth. Robert Kiyosaki. I thought of that quote. My dear friend, Noah Ostroff, thank you for coming back. Episode 108, for anyone listening to this, go check that out. This was from a few years ago. First of all, thank you for being a friend and a mentor and a supporter over the years. Noah has not only impacted me, but countless people in the real estate community when it comes to sales, investing in real estate, developments, other miscellaneous businesses. If I recall from our last podcast in person all those years ago, which the audience can listen to on episode 108, you were driving in your car in the very beginning, making these calls as soon as you got your real estate license. I never forgot that memory. Noah's the type of guy that is not afraid to take a bite out of the metaphorical apple and see success. That's my introduction for you, my friend. Thank you for coming on.
It's like a eulogy speech. You never realize all the nice things that people have to say about you, or the people that you've impacted until after you die. So it's nice to hear it while I'm still alive. Thank you.
Wow. This has to be the first of many. Dang, I got to think about that. I watched this training that you did that I want to recommend to everyone. They can go on YouTube and listen on Global Living YouTube. It's called Make Your Money Work for You, Wealth Building and Investment Strategies. Noah Ostroff, you can see the title, and if you're looking at the pod there, how to spell your name, Ostroff. For those that haven't yet seen it, why would that be beneficial to go through that training for someone if they have an interest in our quote, right? The mindset of building wealth, or they have an interest in developing a passive life in the sense of income, greater abundance. Why would they want to go take that training? That was where I want to start.
Well, I think a lot of people hear the word wealth, or maybe they don't, but not everybody really understands what it means. When you're a kid, people talk to you about being rich, or you see it on TV about being rich. Maybe sometimes people talk about the word wealthy, or sometimes they don't, but I don't think anybody really dives into what it actually means, because we don't really learn about it really in school. And the concept of being wealthy, my definition of it is having $1 more of passive income than you have in personal expenses. So you have the freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. And that's always been important to me. And it's not something that happens overnight. It's a process, not an event. It's a mindset. It's something that you have to focus your life on. And it's a lifestyle, really. And what it allows you to do is be able to have the freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it, having your money work for you instead of you having to work for your money. And the concept of building wealth and eventually generational wealth is making money, buying assets that are cash flowing assets that pay you money while you sleep, right? You make money while you sleep, right? An example of that would be a rental property, buying a piece of real estate that you put tenants in. The tenants pay off your mortgage, and they pay, and you make money off every month. So they pay you an amount, pays off your mortgage, and then there's excess left over, and that's your profits. And you buy enough of those properties, or buy enough buildings that have enough units. Eventually, you have more passive income, meaning money that you're making while you sleep, right? Not the opposite of that, I guess, would be active income, a job that you go and you get a salary. And then you can work because you want to work, not because you have to work. So, the class, you asked about the class, why why go check it out? It's not even a class, really. It was just a podcast. It's just a like a training that I did, really. It was free training that I did. And I think it's good because, I want to impact a lot of people so people can actually learn what it is to be wealthy, right? A lot of people didn't grow up with family members that, taught them about being wealthy. They didn't talk about money, how to manage it. They weren't surrounded by people that were wealthy. They weren't, even if they weren't taught the action steps that they needed to take to do it, and an actual plan. And so I'm just really exposing people to the idea of it, and maybe a couple people will actually take some action on it, right? It opens their mind up, and maybe a couple people will listen to it and take the first steps in what it takes to be wealthy. And I think there's two things in our society that are kind of taboo to talk about, right? And because we don't talk about these things, people don't know about them, know how to do them well. And what do you think those two things are? Money?
I think money. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, money. And what do you think the other one is? I'll let you say the other one out loud.
I want to say culture. No, I'm just kidding. I would think like religion or something, or politics.
Nah. Money and sex. They're the two things that people don't talk about, right? And because people don't talk about freely, they're taboo to talk about, right? You don't talk about your sex life publicly too much, and you don't talk about money. How much money do you have in the bank? You don't go around and say, hey, how much money do you have in the bank? And because it's taboo to talk about it, people don't talk about it. People don't ask the questions of the people that actually know how to do it, because it's not appropriate to talk about. And because people don't talk about it, there are people that know about it and are exposed to it, and there's the people that are not exposed to it and they don't want to ask the questions because it's not appropriate. And so I'm just sort of liberating the conversation around it so people can be more free to talk about it, really.
What, in your experience interacting with so many independent or those that are seeking independence through real estate, through sales, and earning commissions, being in that endeavor, what are some of the myths that people believe that maybe they're not even aware that they believe? Like, I guess is like how they view money, or how they view creating wealth, like the 1099 individuals, the entrepreneurial individuals, the people climbing the ladder.
Well, I think
some of the myths that they see, because I think that's a lot of our audience.
I think society doesn't teach us the right thing. I was having a conversation at dinner last night with my kids, because they're about to end school, and they're finishing up 8th grade. They're about to go into high school next year. And, the subjects that they're talking about are we're talking about artificial intelligence and, Chat GPT specifically, and how, Chat GPT and artificial intelligence can write their papers and write their emails and do their math homework and, all this stuff. And so the topic of conversation at dinner last night was, well, with artificial intelligence coming out and sort of, you not having to necessarily know as many things, you can look up a lot of the things. How would you reinvent school? How would you reinvent education? What things would you keep? What things would you get rid of, knowing that you don't necessarily need to memorize all this information anymore, because now you can just kind of look it up? What things would you introduce? And we can go on a major tangent with that topic, but the point of me saying that is one of the topics we brought up was money, how to manage money, how to invest in money, how to be a better business person. And I'm not saying everybody needs to go into business, but money is just a general part of everybody's life, no matter what. And the point that I was trying to make with them is that people really don't talk about it, so they don't understand it. I lost my train of thought for a second, so let me come back to that concept.
What is that a big piece of, like, the entrepreneurs that are pursuing real estate as a means for acquiring, let's say, income, money? What myths are they living,
right,
that they're not even aware that they're living, that stop them from building that wealth that they they think they're even on the chase to get. I guess that because
Yeah,
that's kind of where I want to.
I'm going to answer that in 1 second. So I remember what I was going to say. So growing up, people are taught you go to school, you get good grades. And why do you get good grades? So you can get into a good college. And why is it important to get into a good college? So you can get a good job after college. And so you can, put money away in your 401k and save up for retirement so that by the time you're 65 years old, you can, sort of live the life that you want, right? It's like
Sounds terrible.
It sounds terrible and that's what people are taught, right? So like if you did everything right, this would probably be our parents' generation, maybe even, grandparents. So theoretically, like if our parents or grandparents did everything, quote unquote, that they were supposed to do, they got good grades, they had a good job, they were, 9-to-5 job for their whole life. They got a pension, they got retirement, they saved up, they have a 401k, blah, 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 they retired. To me, that's completely backwards. I want to live my life now. I want to live my life now, and I want to be able to do all the things I want to do now. I don't want to wait until I'm 65 to do all those things. There's a lot of things about, traveling. People travel when they're older, and in order to travel, when you're young, you have the time, but maybe you don't have the money. When you're older, you have the money. And you probably have the time, but you may not have the health, right? They're the three things that you kind of need. You need to have time, money, and health. And when you're younger, you have the health, you probably have the time, but you don't have the money. And you're older, you may not have the health. So why not do all those things as you go? So I know that's not the question you asked me. So I'll get back to the question you asked me about what are the myths about it? And I think, what I just said is one of the myths, right? It's what people are not taught the right things. They're taught what I just explained, that is the right way to live your life and manage your money. And there's another way out there. And I think some of the things that I talk about in my thing about why most people don't become wealthy, it's really five main things. It's number one, it just never occurs to people, right? They just don't think about it because they were never taught to do it. They were never exposed to the people that did it. They were never, nobody in their friend group or their family or their, school or anybody growing up did it. So it just never occurred to them, right? And the second thing is that they just never decide to do it. So even if they know about it, they're exposed to it, they don't actually take the steps to decide to do it. They don't take the action of what's necessary to do it. And the third thing of why people don't become wealthy is procrastination, right? It's a big thing in our society. People just wait and wait and wait. And then it's too late. You're going to do it someday. You're going to do it. Maybe you'll do it next week. You'll do it when, you have more time, or when you get done this or done that, or when your kids are old, like whatever the excuse is, it's procrastination, and they never do it. The fourth thing is really why people don't become wealthy. It's just the inability to delay gratification, right? You have to have a long, and the last thing, and this ties in, is just, people don't have people have a lack of time perspective. They don't have a long-term perspective on things. So the fact that they can't delay gratification, they're not able to save up enough money to be able to have enough excess money left over to be able to invest that and start to build wealth. A lot of people spend a lot of the money that they make, and because they spend so much money, they don't have all the excess money left over. And building wealth is a kind of a business of the future. You have to have a long-term perspective in order to be able to build wealth. I have a couple, like sayings about wealth that I say. I say, wealth is the gap between your ego and your income. I say wealth is what you accumulate, not what you spend, right? Just because you have a fancy car or a nice boat or, nice jewelry and stuff like that doesn't mean you're wealthy. Doesn't even mean you have a lot of money, right? It just means you spend a lot of money. Wealth is what you don't see, right? The most wealthy people in the world, some of them, not all of them, a lot of them are just very under the radar. You wouldn't know. Warren Buffett, who I know you're a big fan of, is, a great example of that. Lived in the same house for decades and decades and decades, and drives a old beat up car, and, low expenses. And, and the last thing is wealth is an end game, not an annual game, right? Wealth is not an annual game. It's an end game. It's something that you're building in the future. It's a business that you build in the future. So
what do you think the role of confidence is in that scenario of that. Let's just talk about saving versus spending. Like, do you think it takes us, like, where do you think confidence falls into this? Because that just pops in my head.
I think, you use the word confidence, and I think confidence comes from knowledge. And I think in order to build wealth and to be an investor and to do that, I think it comes from now two things really: knowledge and money. Maybe more than two things, but these are the two things that pop into my head when you say confidence. And I think confidence comes from knowledge and money, right? Knowledge is the mindset of how to do it, what to do, whether you're investing or whether you're building something or whatever. You have to understand like what a good investment is. You have to understand what value is in order to recognize opportunity. You have to know kind of how money works, right? So all this is knowledge. I use knowledge as the general topic, but once you have the knowledge, then you have to have the money to be able to go out and do it. So it's either you having your own money or having access to money or finding people that you can partner up with in these deals to kind of get your feet wet and get started until you have enough of your own money to be able to do it on your own. And maybe you never have enough of your own money. You're always, a partner in something. And you don't necessarily have to have money to bring value to a partnership or bring value to a deal, right? In every partnership and every deal, there's different pieces of value that people bring. Bringing money to the deal is one piece of value. Bringing the deal is another piece of value. Bringing knowledge, maybe time, right? Time is another piece of value because plenty of doctors out there or lawyers or other, professionals that have money, but don't have the time to go out and do it. So somebody that has that, and I think if you have the knowledge and maybe even if you have the money, that gives you confidence to go out and, take some risks and go out and find opportunities. You have to find opportunities in order to do deals. You have to take action. Investing requires action, and successful investing requires the right action because investors take action.
No, this actually might be a great segue to something, if you're comfortable talking about it, without giving away the address, because I wouldn't want to mess up your flow. We recently walked a potential opportunity. Why do you think that, without going into where it is or anything like that, why would it potentially not be a good deal? And then why do you think, or how do you think, or what would have to happen for it to potentially be a good deal? If you could paint that picture. The reason I ask that is you're such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to, seeing something that's maybe right in front of everybody listening to this, and they've never realized, like, oh, that could be an investment that could build wealth and create freedom for myself. So, like, what was that we were walking, and why wouldn't it be good potentially, and why would it, if you were to break down?
So going back to the knowledge piece of it, you have to know when something is a good deal. And for me, knowing when something is a good deal is staying in my lane, right? I pretty much just invest in a specific area that I know very well, meaning I know what different product types will sell for in that area. I know what different units will rent for in that specific area. So I can analyze these deals much quicker because I have the knowledge, which gives me the confidence to know that my numbers that I'm analyzing this with are accurate, right? If I went to an area that I didn't know, I'd have to depend on other people, and I have to kind of, base my confidence on their confidence, and I'd have to do some research. So there's three kinds of, so with that foundation of knowledge of an area, there's three kind of deals that cross my plate. I'm generalizing, right? I'm sure there's a lot more than three, but there's the deals that are a great deal, and I know right away, based upon where the property is and the size of it, what I can do there, and the price. The price is really what I'm talking about. I know if it's a good deal. I don't even really need to do much research. Of course, I'm going to run some numbers, but I know right away it's a good deal, right? It's the same way if I said, hey, I have this iPhone here, right? Most people know iPhone. If I say, hey, I'm going to sell this iPhone to you for $10, you would know right away that that's a good deal, right? It's in perfect condition. It's brand new. It works. You know that this iPhone for $10 is a good deal because you know the value of an iPhone, right?
Yeah.
If I said to you, hey, I have this iPhone right here, it's brand new, nothing special, but regular iPhone, it's $100,000. You know right away that that's overpriced. If I said it's $500, that you don't know necessarily if that's overpriced or not, but you're going to do a little more research, right? So there are the three kinds of deals that cross my plate. There's the ones that I know are definitely a good deal that I need to move on quickly. There's the ones that I know that are way overpriced. And then there's the ones in between where I'm not sure if it's a good deal or not. I'm not sure if the deal is going to work. It doesn't really seem overpriced. It's not like super cheap. I got to run some numbers, right? So the question you asked about this specific deal that we looked at, I wasn't sure. It seemed overpriced to me on the surface. So we started tossing around ideas. What can you build there, right? That's the thing. We said, well, how many units can you build there if we were to do multifamily? What if we turned it into condos? Could we make more money off of it if we did that? What if we did half rentals, half condos? What if we turned it into houses? What if we kept it as a parking lot? What if we put commercial space on the first floor? Can we get more rent for it that? What if we just kept it as is? Because this was an existing building, right? What if we kept it as is and not put any money or put minimal money into it? Is it a better deal that way, right? So we started tossing around all the different scenarios that we could think of, right? Somebody else might come along and look at it differently than us and be able to make the deal work. But when we looked at it, we tossed around every possible scenario because it was not a cheap property. And most of the scenarios that we were throwing out there, it didn't work, right? It didn't work as single family homes. It didn't work as multifamily. It didn't work to keep it as is because the rent was too low based upon what they were asking for. It didn't work a hybrid model. So we literally ran through every scenario that the two of us could think of. And then we determined, you know what? The deal doesn't work. And that's kind of how we looked at that deal. So those are kind of the three deals that I look at. And the overpriced ones, I don't just necessarily just toss them out. I keep my eye on them. I say, how long has it been on the market for? I talk to the person that's, in charge of selling it and saying, what's the deal? It's overpriced. What's the seller willing to take? It's not worth that much. And sometimes, you find deals where you don't think you're going to find deals. And sometimes you have to be persistent and wait and, give it some time. But it all comes from the knowledge and understanding what the value is. And you get that from kind of staying in your lane or having a trusted resource that can advise you well, that is on your side. And being able to do the research on your own and understanding, when there's an opportunity and when there's not.
You just asked so many powerful questions. How important in your mind is it to ask questions? What, I guess I just, question mark, right? How important is it to ask questions?
I think you have to ask questions to gain a certain base level of knowledge if you're just starting out. And you're going to ask questions, you're going to listen in on conversations, you're going to, you try to get a seat at the table really to just, see what's going on. And then when you're there, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, right? So you're not necessarily going to know the questions to ask right away. You're going to have a limited amount of questions. And then as you get more experience, you'll figure out more questions to ask. And eventually you'll get enough confidence to be able to, take that leap and do your first investment. And, maybe your first one, you start off small, whether it's a small single family home or a small duplex or triplex or something inexpensive, something that if you mess up the first time, it's not going to bankrupt you. And then you gain the knowledge on the small deals, and then you build confidence like you're mentioning, and maybe you have a little bit more money, and then you can move on to something maybe a little bit bigger, and if you want, or you can just continue to make that your business model. You have to eventually you figure out what your business model is going to be, right? Are you a flipper? Do you build new construction? Do you do multifamily or mixed use? Do you do commercial stuff? Do you build bigger stuff? Do you syndicate deals, right? There's so many different options of ways that you can be an investor. There's not one way that's necessarily better than the other. You just have to figure out what's right for you and what you feel most comfortable with, and which direction you want to go in. And you learn that through time and experience.
What's worked for you up to this point, and why do you think it's worked?
I started off when I got serious doing new construction because that was my background. So I would buy vacant land and I would build new construction homes and I would sell the new construction homes. And that was my business model for a long time. And, at some point you sell enough stuff and you have enough money in the bank and you want to start investing that money into, more passive income, right? Money that's going to pay you back or pay you. And so then I started to do a hybrid of new construction homes and some small multifamily investments. I think I did a triplex, was like my first one, a small triplex. And
Build that?
I didn't build that one. Actually, yeah, my first one I did build. Yeah, that was my first one was a 5-unit building. It was
That's
commercial
cool.
on the first floor and then a 6-unit building, commercial on the first floor and then 5 units above. And I built that one and, it did well. And, it took me a little bit more time to build up the bank account again and then do another one. That's the thing with a lot, the way that I invest in stuff is once you put the money, I'm a cash flow investor, right? So the goal is to have more cash flow. So once you buy a property and you put your down payment down or your equity down, I'm not refinancing those and pulling cash out. Some people will do that. I don't do that. So once I put that money in, that's pretty much there. I want to say forever, but pretty much I'm not getting that money back in anytime soon. So I'm getting it back, on smaller monthly payments. So, right, you run out of money pretty quickly, right? So you have to have another source of income that's sort of funding the ability to do more deals, whether that's through new construction, whether that's your job, whatever that is, you have to have a way to continue to fund that, doing it the way I do it, right? If you're not refinancing it. So then over time, I kind of switched to a lot more multifamily and mixed use, 10 to 30 unit buildings for me are like a nice wheelhouse. I've done bigger stuff. We're doing an 82 unit project right now. But 10 to 30 unit multifamily and mixed use buildings isn't like a nice wheelhouse for me when I can find that stuff. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
The idea of not refinancing, does that go back to one of your rules? I just want to, the 5 things, the delayed gratification and the lack of time perspective. I thought the 5 things. So can you unpack that or coach me back on that if I'm off?
Yeah.
Those are 2 things that pop in my mind when I hear like, I'm not refinancing, that money's staying in there.
Right. Because
I am the right track.
If my business model is to increase my cash flow, increase my passive income over time. So, in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I have X amount of dollars coming in on a monthly basis. It would sort of be counterintuitive if I continue to refinance and pull cash out because then my mortgage would be higher and I'd have less cash flow, right? So for me, that I don't do that, but also I have other sources of income, so I'm able to do that. So I have three ways I think about my business. Number one, I have my job, right? That's what I come to work to do every day. For me, that's, maybe selling houses or running brokerages or whatever, like sort of my job is every day that I make money on. Maybe I have a salary. Then I take that money and I roll it into new construction flips and where you make bigger chunks of money. And then I take that money and I put it into the longer term wealth building, the passive income stuff that the money doesn't come back, right? So that for me is a 3-tier system. Now, some people, you need to have at least one of those other things, right? A job or you do flips or something to be able to continue to fund those things. But the way that other people could potentially do it, if you don't have, other sources of income coming in that can continue to fund deals on a regular basis, is you refinance, right? You get a deal, you add value to it, whether it's you fix it up, improve the value, or you build, on top of a piece of land, you're adding value to it. So it's worth more than when you bought it. And then you can refinance it and pull cash out, right? And then you pull cash out and you use that cash to invest in your next deal. And you build value and you refinance, you pull cash out and you invest in your next deal. So those first couple deals, you're not having a lot of cash flow, but you're having enough money to be able to go and do more deals. And then your tenants are still paying off your mortgage. So over time, you're building up equity in these properties, right? But eventually, if you want to be a cash flow investor, have a lot more cash coming in, eventually you might want to stop refinancing or pulling as much cash out, because it's going to take much longer to be able to have a lot of passive income if you're pulling a lot of cash out of every deal. But again, everybody's business model is different. I'm just giving you my business model. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just what I do.
How do you view risk when it comes to leverage?
Well, I say just because there's risk doesn't mean that something is risky. There's definitely right now, it's definitely harder to get deals done right now when we're recording. We're in 2023 right now, in the summer of 2023. Interest rates are really high right now. When I say really high, it's a relative term, but I would say, on multifamily, you're probably in the high 5% to 7% interest rate. And if you're doing construction loans, you might be higher than that. You might be 8% or 9%, or if it's non-recourse, you could be even higher than that. And of course, some people are lower, but I'm just giving you the general. So it's harder to make deals work right now. So having too much leverage is going to be a problem, I think, in the future, especially because a lot of these multifamily loans, they're not long-term loans. They're 5-year, 7-year, 10-year loans. So, luckily for me, I refinanced a lot of these properties a couple of years ago when interest rates were 4% or lower. So I'm good for a few more years. But if interest rates are still, in 6% or higher, once these loans come due, it's going to be tough for a lot of people. And I know a lot of people have loans coming due. I think the office market is in trouble right now. I think there's, the commercial real estate market for offices and bigger buildings is going to be in big trouble. I think I read an article the other day that like $1.5 trillion worth of commercial loans are coming due in 2025, which is, like what, a year and a half.
$1.5 trillion
worth of loans.
Holy, that sounds like a lot.
And we're about a year and a half away from that. And the office market right now, a lot of these bigger office buildings, on average, on the top 15 biggest cities, vacancy rates are like at 19%. New York, Philadelphia is 19%. San Francisco is like over 20%. Boston was over 20%. Austin was around 19%. Baltimore was high. Like a lot of these, major cities where a lot of the office buildings, 17+% vacancy rates. Well, when you have that high of vacancy rate in a big building like that, you can't pay your loans. And when you can't pay your loans, the bank has to take back these properties, right? Or, loans come due and the bank can't afford to take back all these properties. They don't have, that kind of liquidity or the ability, or everybody sort of has to give back their properties at the same time. That's going to be another potential banking crisis if something like that happens, where there's going to need to be a government bailout, in about a year and a half for the commercial real estate market. You can watch this episode in about 2 years and see if my prediction comes true.
Wow. No, that's powerful. Actually, I want to just go back to something you said earlier, to make sure I get this. If the shorter term loans, if people have to then refi, and if they refi, the rates are higher, couldn't that potentially kill the cash flow completely?
It could kill
someone. Yeah, I'm curious about that.
It could kill the cash flow completely, or it could be negative cash flow, right? Because if you're again, if you're not an experienced investor, forget about being experienced. Like some of these like I have a lot of New York investors that will come to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a better place to invest than New York. You get higher cap rates in Philadelphia. New York, you might 2%, 2 or 3% cap rate, which is super low. 4% is super low. You come to Philly, maybe you're getting 5%, 6%. Maybe you're doing, better than that. But But if you're buying stuff on a 4 or 5% cap rate, and your interest rate on your loan is 5 or 6%, well, you're at negative cash flow at that point, and the property doesn't cash flow. But also another thing is with these banks, a lot of the terms of the banks that they give out, they have one of the things that they require is to have a debt coverage ratio of 1.25 or 1.3, or every bank's a little bit different, but that just means that your net operating income, your cash flow, is basically 125% better than your debt. So like the simplest example is if your debt coverage ratio is 1, that means, like, let's just say you have $10,000 of income or net, of cash flow, and you have $10,000 mortgage. Well, basically 100% of your cash flow covers 100% of your mortgage. So your debt coverage ratio is 1. If it's 12,500 and it's, $10,000 mortgage is 1.25. If it's 20,000 and your mortgage is 10,000, your debt coverage ratio is 2, right? It's double. It covers 200% of it. So most banks require 1.25 debt coverage ratio, 1.3, some are a little higher. Well, you go to refinance, and now your cash flow is much lower because your debt service, your mortgage, is much higher. These properties are not necessarily going to qualify for the terms of these loans. So I don't know what the banks are going to do in those situations, because a lot of people are going to have these same issues.
Do you think we're in an environment where people need to be prepared to just have more equity in deals, disposable as well as creativity? And then can you unpack whether that's accurate or not?
I think it's a possibility that the banks are going to maybe require more equity in these deals because, again, of the debt coverage ratio, right? Because if you lower the amount if you put more equity in a deal, the mortgage is not as much, and you can balance it out like that. So I think that's certainly a possibility that the banks might consider. What was the other part of your question?
Well, I guess that, is creativity going to play a big role in this, or could it play a big role? And the reason I asked that is, if let's say that people have bought things not too high, but high relative to the current rates, to the current cost of money, because maybe they bought something 5 years ago or 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So then there's creative opportunities to buy things because other people can't keep them anymore, kind of thing. So I'm curious what you think about that. Is this at like a Renaissance even opportunity?
It's going to be interesting. There's going to be people, maybe like me, that don't cash out and refinance their properties, pull cash out. And, I might be 5 or 7 or 10 years into a loan, and I've paid off a lot of my debt in 5 or 7 or 10 years, so I have a lot more equity in the property at that point. Theoretically, the property would be worth more, but even if it's not, I've now paid down the mortgage by 5 years or 7 years or 10 years worth of principal payments. So, I'm less of a risk, but not everybody does that. So, that's one factor. I think, the banks are not necessarily going to want to take back all of these properties all at the same time. So they're going to probably want to figure out how to keep people in these deals so they don't have to. But I also think it's going to create some buying opportunities as well, because, the deals don't necessarily work anymore at the higher interest rates if it's like a marginal deal, and people will need to sell these properties either because they're required to, or because they're forced to, or because they're underwater on a property, or they need to raise money to put towards maybe other properties they have. There's going to be a lot of different situations. And I think there potentially could be some buying opportunities coming up in the next year or so. If you have some cash sitting on the sidelines, cash is making good interest rates in the bank now, 3, 4, maybe even up to 5% sitting in the bank, depending on your bank. So it's not terrible keeping some cash in the bank right now. And I think there's going to be some buying opportunities that are going to come up. I think it's just a natural occurrence of this real estate cycle we're in.
I wanted to ask this earlier, but for those that don't know, what is a cap rate?
Cap rate is a capitalization rate. So it's essentially net operating income divided by price of the property. So net operating income would be the total annual expenses. So I'm sorry, the total annual income. So all the rent you bring in, minus your total annual operating expenses to operate the property, minus a vacancy rate that we sort of factor in. So, the banks typically will let you get away with like a 5% vacancy rate. Sometimes you might want to put in 8%. If you're in office market, you might put 20%, you know what I mean? But so you take the total annual income minus the total annual expenses minus a vacancy rate that everybody determines, right? And then you're left with a net operating income. And then you take that and you take the net operating income and divide it by the price of the property or the all-in cost, and you get a cap rate, which is short for capitalization rate. And that's assuming a cash deal. It doesn't factor in debt service, doesn't factor in
So
mortgage.
if I bought a property cash for $1 million and the NOI is 50,000, it's 5%.
Yep, 50,000 divided by $1 million.
So my next question to that is, if the NOI is the total income, because I wrote this down, this is awesome. You said minus the expenses, and you're looking at, and as well as vacancy rate. Income would be based on what these apartments, let's say, let's use that as an example, are rented out for. So there's a level of, I got to figure that out if I'm managing this, acquiring, managing, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could raise them, maybe they're too high, whatever. So that there's a lever to pull, right? Yep. And then expenses, like how it's, did I buy the paint too much or did I buy it too low?
No, it's not expense. It's operating expenses to operate the property. It's not construction. So operating expenses would be real estate taxes. It would be insurance. It would be property management. It would be cleaning bills, maintenance on the property, trash, stuff like that, right? So the expenses that and there's more too, but it's the stuff that you need to operate the property.
All of that based on knowledge is going to be higher or lower, or am I off on like baby?
Yeah, everywhere is different. In Philadelphia, a lot of the properties we build that are new construction, we have tax abatement, so our taxes are much lower. Typically when I'm analyzing these properties, the back of the napkin math that I use is like a 20% expense ratio. So I take my, total annual projected income revenue, like total of all the rents or all the income. And then I take 20% off for expenses. And that gives me like a ballpark number for my gross profit before the debt service and before vacancy rate. But in Philly, we have the tax abatement, so it's not typically 20% for me. Sometimes my properties are 12%, 12% expenses or 15% expenses, which is low in some areas. If you go and buy if we're talking about, Philadelphia, for example, or any city really that has an older building like a brownstone, where the property taxes on that property are very high. If you have to pay a lot of property taxes, that's going to eat up a lot of your expenses. If you're paying the utilities on behalf of your tenants, that's going to eat up a lot of your expenses. My properties, the tenants pay their own utilities, but if you own a property where you pay the utilities, that's going to eat up, your expenses. So you have to factor all of this stuff in when you go and you buy a property. You have to know this stuff, right? You have to have knowledge. You have to know the right questions to ask. And, I teach a class on this, how to analyze multifamily properties and what all these terms mean and kind of how to look at it. It's like a basic 101 type of a class, but at least it gives the foundation of how to do it. I think I maybe have a video on YouTube somewhere around that too.
Yeah, I was going to ask, where can people pursue that? There may be a lot of listeners that want that.
I think I have something on YouTube, how to invest in multifamily properties. I think it's there somewhere if you look up my name and look up.
No, in the spirit of ideally having you back to give us continue a master class on how to build wealth versus look nouveau rich. The 5 things, it never occurs to people. Number 1, they never decide to do it. Number 2, procrastination, delay gratification, unable to do that. lack of time perspective, if you were to put a bow on this part of the conversation, would you say is a takeaway for our listeners, just based on where we started today?
Number one, just like anything, anytime I speak or go to anything or teach, take action, right? Just do one thing. You may have a long list of notes of all these things that you need to do or should do, or you change your entire business or your life or your routine. That's great. Just pick one thing and actually take action and do it. And for me, if you're brand new, take the first step, get the knowledge, like start to learn how to do it. Commit yourself in your mind that you want to become wealthy, that you want to learn how to do this, that you're going to have the mindset of a wealthy person, a mindset of an investor. And in order to do that, you're going to take the steps necessary to learn how to become that. So that's your action item for today.
Everyone listening to this, listen to episode 108 of the Culture Matters podcast, because we really go into Noah's story and where he's come from and what he's accomplished. And then re-listen to this episode, and we will ideally see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Thanks, Noah. Thanks for coming on.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jay.